And thank you, Leo, for, I guess, being here in person after lockdown and having a conversation with me. You've come on board with the In-betweeners checkup podcast. We've been talking about different struggles that a lot of people have been facing out there. And I guess I've been listening to yourself more recently in terms of the messages that you've been putting out there, and it's really resonated with me. And I thought it would be great to have you on board and give you an opportunity to maybe share that message a little bit further.
Right on.
I guess I think back, Jesus, a few years back now, but when I first became aware of you, it was all about the music, and I guess we share a love of bass, but I've had an opportunity to, I guess, learn a little bit more about you besides the DJ and such, and realise that there's, I guess, a real desire to do more than just entertain people for a brief period, shall we say, and that you've really got this, I'm not sure how to describe it, just a passion for life and helping people, and I guess helping the world, whatever that might look like at this time. And like there's a lot of crap going on at the moment, and people can focus on the negative and they can focus on the positive, but I'm hoping that your message can shine a little bit of light on people for when they may be struggling at this time. So I hand it over to you, and you can tell everyone a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. Yeah. The message sort of changes and evolves over time, but the idea that of essentially dissatisfaction, really, like not quite stoked with the world that we got handed, and if there was some sort of mission, would be to kind of leave it in better shape than we found it. And well, of course, I graduated from university right in the middle of the global financial crisis, and I had this degree which basically kind of more or less taught me just kind of like how screwed up the world is, and with no really any empowering kind of pathway to fixing it. Which is a funny thing to have a student loan for. And so, yeah, like with the music, it was really great. So for 10 years, I kind of partied professionally, and that was great. Like it paid the bills. But it freed up my days to essentially sort of journey school myself and find solutions, many of which sort of fit under this umbrella of permaculture.
Yes.
And so after a while of traveling, playing music and having a great time, but I'd been around the world, and I played kind of like in a lot of really amazing places and festivals, and sort of wound up back here in New Zealand with this kind of suspicion that it wasn't what a place could do for me, but what I could do for a place.
Yes.
And here in Tauranga, we've got like this is like the retirement village of New Zealand.
Yeah.
And it really, really did need me, and I've been working hard to kind of influence the city towards something a little bit more progressive. And it is a little bit, it's kind of, I can feel the traction.
Yeah.
Not to say it's all me, but that's like a movement that I feel like we're starting to see nationwide as well. Is people starting to care a little bit more, and sort of participate in the world, in our communities and in our society, and also within our ecology. There are, I suppose, just like, even though lockdown was really interesting, the thing that people were most sort of missing or angry about was that they couldn't go fishing or surfing or walking in the bush.
Yes.
And I actually took a lot of pleasure in that.
Yeah.
That's what people were missing.
Okay. because that's what really meant something to them, or it
Yeah.
just made people wake up to the world as they were living in it?
I believe that many of the issues that we are facing come as a result of a disconnection from nature and from each other and from ourselves. And when we're close with nature, we're able to heal a lot of those disconnections. Obviously the one with nature, but also with ourselves. Just that kind of that peace and quiet and that sense of belonging. A lot of our kind of early psychological fears come from our fear of not belonging and the sort of lack of safety that comes with that. And so if we can reconnect people with nature, then they can have this, it really reconnects them on this level of identity, which is kind of the thing that we're missing mainly in our culture of sort of separation and division across class and race and gender. That's what's keeping us apart, and it's the othering of other.
So coming back to New Zealand, I guess, was there a desire for more of that belonging? Was there a sense that maybe things were a little bit unclear in terms of where you fit or how connected you were with nature?
I think with someone who had the level of privilege that I did have and had music as a way to access kind of anywhere in the world, my identity had really kind of expanded into this kind of global citizen. And so, but there's not only so long you can kind of keep that up, because the desire, of course, is to like put your roots down and kind of have a little bit more familiarity in your day to day. I mean, I have met people that would like to keep traveling their whole lives, but generally there comes a point where you really kind of just want to like have a garden, and that's a metaphor for a number of anythings, you know. And so, but for me, that your question is still very relevant, because it's actually more relevant to me now than it was then, as I have got a real sense of place-based identity here in Aotearoa, and especially in Mount Maunganui. A line of inquiry I've been taking is, as I discover Te Ao Māori, the world of Māori, and learning the reo, is that I'm not tangata whenua to here, but I'm tangata whenua to somewhere. Where is it? And so I've been kind of like really researching like sort of Scandinavian like spirituality and like Celtic spirituality, and like the relationship that my ancestors had to their lands. And they're strikingly similar worldviews to Mātauranga Māori, the wisdom of the Māori people. And it's really, really helping me develop that sense of place here. And when I go to the marae, I actually hold myself differently because I know who I am in their eyes. And like, I suppose as someone who I felt like I did know myself, and I had known myself for a long time, because my living and my life is very much aligned in my purpose. I wasn't really like feeling too lost in that sense. But when you move into Indigenous communities, your identity is so tied up in your whakapapa, your ancestry. And so I realized that to the kuia or the kaumātua or someone in that community, I didn't know myself. And hey, to a certain degree, they were right. And so I have been on this really path of rediscovering who I am in terms of my ancestors, and then that helps me kind of be more me. And I think that's that authenticity that informs my work that attracts people to it.
Okay.
People crave sort of genuine action.
Yes.
Because we're all quite acutely aware of all the problems in the world, and they can be really overwhelming, and everyone wants to do a thing. We all want to do something about it. But it's like, it's what?
Yeah.
And there's just so much kind of misinformation in the world, and our kind of bullshit radars are still developing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I don't even watch the news these days, to be honest, because I don't feel like it informs me as to what's really happening out in the world. I just feel like it's telling a particular story that they want to feed me at that time. I mean, for myself, I'm half Croatian. I've never been to Croatia. I had planned to be there right now, actually, until lockdown kicked in, and I thought, this is an opportunity to kind of get a little bit more in touch with my ancestral roots, and I guess understand a little bit more about myself in the process. I'm like 1/16 Maori, but again, that's something that I haven't really exposed myself to in any way, shape or form. In fact, my wife, who's from overseas, probably has a better grasp of the Maori language than I have, because she's in the education space. And like, I think that in part is just about how New Zealand's come over the last sort of 20, 30 years in terms of the schooling, and the fact that it's playing more and more of a part in our national identity, I guess. Because at the end of the day, Māori only exist in New Zealand, and it's important that we embrace them. And well, I mean, it's important that we embrace everyone, regardless of what race. But I feel that particularly in New Zealand, I guess, because they don't exist elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's that level of national identity that is formed from the personal identity, and you don't I wouldn't want people to take away that, like, if they're not connected to their ancestors, then they'll never find out who they are. Indeed, in New Zealand, I think it's actually a very common pattern for people's grandfathers or great grandfathers, or their more immediate ancestors, to have almost kind of shut out that old world and not kept the stories going, because like the Industrial Revolution and like Europe, especially in that time, that would have been a really stink place to be if you weren't part of that aristocracy or those higher echelons of society in that mercantile class. And I don't really blame my ancestors for not keeping the lineage. And so I do feel quite disconnected directly. But indirectly, there are aspects of, I think it's important to take into account that many of those countries were colonized as well. So acknowledging that they had been colonized and then trying to reconnect with that pre-colonial existence on that land is potentially how we will reconnect with the pre-colonial existence on this land. And through that process, we are able to decolonize our minds, ourselves, our communities, and then our country as well. And it's really this process of colonization that people don't quite take into account when they see like disproportionate amount of Māori and Pacific Islanders represented in our prisons or our healthcare and things like that. It's one thing that I suppose I've learned is that we as humans, as we form in the world, we are only ever acting from the totality of our experience. And so if you're only drawing on essentially a community, a family, that is inherently has prejudice against you, then we're just playing out trauma that has been stored in our psyche over generations. And so I mean, it's really timely now. We've just come out of COVID-19, and like America is freaking out because this big systemic racist prejudice has been revealed in its policing. And here we are in New Zealand, where the same systemic racism exists, just not to that degree. I suppose it's just not magnified by the fact that people carry firearms. And that's a really, I'm pretty glad about that.
Me too.
But there's a lot of work to be done in terms of familiarizing people with their privilege, especially Pākehā. So yeah, the people with Pākehā means other.
Okay.
And so people that weren't here,
Yeah.
who have come here.
Yeah.
So that's actually not like a derogatory term. It's just like someone who has come here, and fundamentally, like on a kind of like a state legal level, Pākehā, myself included, and my family are here because of a treaty that was signed with the first people of this land. And that treaty is actually a really reasonable contract.
Yeah.
It's I truly, like, I was in Wellington, I was in the National Library, and I was reading it, and I was going, this is actually a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful vision for a relationship between two people. And the obvious problem is that it just was not honoured, and that contract was broken so many times, and is still broken to this day. So there seems to be like this kind of really interesting nexus between this people who, for myself, who mainly operate in an ecological advocacy sense.
Yeah.
But then there's all these people who are more focusing on social justice.
Yes.
The Treaty of Waitangi really, actually, if we were to honour that, would provide a lot of answers to some very burning questions in both of those camps.
Okay.
Not to polarize them, but there are aspects of the way Māori live their life and are seeking to live their life through the treaty that would address our ecological issues and our social issues.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we touched on sort of the cultural piece and the fact that I'm not that in touch with my culture. And to be fair, I think that has a lot to do with the way that my family dynamic exists, so that I haven't necessarily, I don't want to say have that opportunity because it sounds like I'm shifting the blame, but that there hasn't necessarily been a dynamic that has allowed for that to simply happen. And when I look at sort of a lot of Maori or Pacific families, that family plays such a key role in that dynamic and that support structure and that network. I mean, we come to Tauranga, just myself and my wife, and had a child, and they say it takes a village to raise a child. And when you have that family around you, and look, they may be blood, they might not be, it makes such a difference. And you take the family and then you expand it to the community, and then it's the large area, and then you can, like, it just, if you have those underlying principles within a group of people, then there's harmony. As soon as it becomes individualistic or egotistical, and it's like divide and conquer, and everyone just bangs up against it, and nothing really happens. And I kind of feel in some respects that what we're seeing in the world at the moment on a large scale comes down to a very individual mindset about the way we interact in the world, and it's just magnified by the number of people that exist in it.
Yeah, totally. And the Māori culture has so much in there for us. Like, one of the kind of key tenets is this idea of kotahitanga, which is kind of solidarity and unity and oneness, and that as soon as we work together, we're able to achieve so much. And but you really like revealed something there, which it kind of, it's more or less the basis of our whole economic system, really, is that we are all competing for the same scarce resources. Whereas nature is actually the opposite of scarce and has so much to give, and there's plenty to go around. It's just not going around because of this scarcity mindset that sort of positions us in competition with each other. And that's as soon as those groups, as that sort of that community fabric gets woven, that we're able to move into a place of mutual benefit. And that's something that I feel like there's a lot of clues, a lot of breadcrumbs to pick up and follow into the world of Māori, so that we can do that.
So I guess more locally, are you aware of groups that give people that opportunity to kind of come together and connect on that level, or some level that maybe those out there are thinking kind of, you know, I'm just me, what on earth can I do? That have an opportunity to come together with others of a similar or such like that could together en masse make an impact?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm wary of answering it in terms of me and my preferences, because at this point it's also really important to celebrate our diversity and the resilience that we get from the diversity as well. But really, like, it's like whatever passion that you have, generally, if it moves in the direction of creating more life, then it's generally like a fairly healthy and constructive passion to have. If it moves in the direction away from life, then it's possibly something that we need to look at and figure out whether or not it's something worth continuing. But I mean, I have dabbled in so many different communities over my time, and I just, you know, that there's always someone else out there who knows something more or less than you, and so there is always an opportunity to either be the teacher or the learner, and it's important to be both.
Absolutely. I think even as a parent, you know, over the last couple of years, I've learned so much from my child and how to respond to the world, because they haven't been exposed to the negative things that I have taken on board and held on to, and they just live each day as it comes to them. And I think, you know, if we could all do that without all the baggage and stuff, how much freer we would be, and how much more would actually happen for the good of all mankind. Like you touch on, I guess, that disconnect with nature, and like this morning, you know, for me, I got up and went up the mount and went for a swim, and just, you know, I felt alive. I felt connected, and I think, you know, it'd be great if I could do this every day. And while I can't necessarily do that every day, I think it's important for people to find those ways of grounding themselves, of not necessarily exposing themselves to the elements, but just really being in nature. And I feel in society we can get so caught up in the busyness of life that those opportunities don't seem to be so frequent. But for yourself, I guess what is it? How do you see? And like, I guess this is obviously what you do, and it might not necessarily work for others, but how do you help to connect with your own nature and the nature around you?
For me, I feel safe whenever I'm around like a healthy ecosystem, or a healthy socio-system. Like if I'm around like kind people, or like a happy crowd at like a music event or a festival or something, I just feel so comfortable in my humanity.
Mm.
And the same goes for when I'm like walking in like a national park, or say I'm like, snorkeling and there's a lot of fish around or something. That to me is that really grounds me into a level of like, it pulls me away from all of the latent sort of fear or that sort of noise of that drone of anxiety that I have about climate change or ecological destruction. If I can see a healthy ecosystem, then I'm, like I say, I'm feeling like really solid within myself. And so what I tend to do to connect when I'm there is move into a place of gratitude.
Yeah.
And if I'm around something that is just so beautiful and healthy, then that really is a gift.
Yeah.
And that's really like the only thing that's our only responsibility that nature asks for all of her gifts is our attention.
Yes.
Like, be there, pay attention, and then if you like what you see, express gratitude. And then if I see a beautiful sunset and I like blow it a kiss or something, then that feels so good that my gratitude generally is expressed in other ways tomorrow and the next day. And then so if I see that beautiful sunset and I go, wow, like, check this world out. If I'm at a waterfall and it's just gorgeous, and I like all of the kind of that New Zealand bush, the way that it lands in my eyes, that marvel and that magic often sort of stimulates a sense of care and responsibility that goes beyond just gratitude to acting with that gratitude. And that action is often like being a good, like a participant in life and in nature, and moving from this kind of sort of pattern where people consider nature to be this other thing, or this kind of grow medium that we can kind of dig up and sell to each other, into a partnership. And so when I'm in my garden and I'm kind of like growing this food, I'm really just working in partnership with nature and giving back, really. So in my work, I just waste and I turn it into soil. And I'm really, really stoked that like past me kind of hooked future me up with this job, because that's kind of, it's just emerged that now I'm doing what I'm doing because this is my calling. And I feel like that's contributed so much to my well-being, is aligning my life with a purpose. And we were speaking about identity and belonging. I no longer sort of see myself as like this individual whose purpose is to like live as comfortably as I can and basically have like the flashiest stuff in my house to like signal to other people that I'm successful. Is now it's my identity is that I'm a guardian and a gardener of this planet. And so that's really totally changed the way that I see myself and I see the world.
And I think you've kind of moved from what I'm going to call a superficial dynamic to really something that's of one's own essence. And the thing about that superficial, that external materiality, is it's not really fulfilling long term. Yes, you can buy a new sports car or whatever, but 2 months later you want the next one up because that buzz is gone. Whereas what you're doing at the moment, it gives you life each and every day. And I think people can kind of get caught up in what's going on in the larger dynamic and feeling disempowered, or they can get caught up with things that aren't quite going right because they're not necessarily listening to their true calling. They're not listening to their life's purpose. They're not connecting with themselves and those around them. And we live in the world that we live in as a result. I guess. I mean, it's very easy to look at the States at the moment and kind of point the finger and stuff, but quite rightly you said, you know, we've got those same issues back here, and us being in New Zealand right now have an opportunity to do something, and together en masse we can make a real impact.
Totally. And if we tune into that purpose, then quite often the outcome isn't as destructive, socially or ecologically. If people are aligned with themselves, it's a lot less likely that they'll go out and commit a hate crime or some kind of ecocidal behavior. And that when people are kind of looking for their purpose, I do get people ask me, like, how did that become so clear? And one framework, a tool that I refer people to is ikigai.
Oh yes.
And which is a Japanese word for what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you enjoy. And it's the intersectionality of if you imagine that as a Venn diagram, it's the middle. Is the ikigai. And that really, you know, I don't love working in waste minimization. It's not like my thing. I also, sometimes people ask me, like, what would I be doing if climate change the climate wasn't changing, or, you know, our oceans weren't acidifying, or sea levels weren't rising, or whatever. And I think I'd probably be kind of like voyaging or exploring or like sailing to some new land or something. But really, it's that kind of ikigai. It's the balance of all of those things that the world needs, that you need to pay the bills, because let's get real, like we're all in a bit of a tight spot. And it's just kind of not taking too much liberty in all of our kind of craziest desires. You know, it's not absolutely necessary that we all have helicopters and we're all kind of drinking like radically priced champagne on the moon or whatever, you know. It's kind of a humble life is actually very fulfilling.
And I mean, it's interesting, those extreme things that you mentioned is because people, it's like an addiction, and then just looking for the next high and the next high and the next high. And yes, look, it will bring some enjoyment briefly, but it's not going to have that lasting value. And it's in essence having that disharmony with the self, or brings a disharmony in nature, and so and then expands, and then you get this, I don't know, wasteful action, for want of a better term. So I guess what you're doing is, yes, you are, I mean, you're looking to eliminate the wasteful action in the world, and through that bring more of a harmony within people and within nature, which I think is beautiful. So I commend you in that. It's probably, I guess I've had this yearning inside me to kind of be trying to do more, and kind of getting into the coaching space is something that I feel that I can take the skills that I've learned in the corporate world and apply them in a real need that exists at this time, and hopefully make a little bit of money out of it as well. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll probably come to you for a bit of advice along the way. But listen, you know, thank you very much for your time today. It's always great to hear what you have to say, and I do appreciate you taking the time to share with myself and those out there who are listening. So cheers, brother.
Cheers, bro. Do the honey.
Yeah.